All right, I will call to order the Transportation Committee meeting of September 20th, 2022. May we have a roll call, please?
Chaplin here, Bissart here, Krajewski
Here.
Ozog here, Pachowski
Here.
Zay.
All right, we have a quorum. I have no report. We public comment is limited to 3 minutes. I have nobody signed in for public comment, so we will go to approval of the minutes of September 6th, 2022. A motion is second. Any changes, alterations, or corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Next is 6 procurement requisitions. I have the motion to approve DTP 0266-22 recommendation for the approval of contract with Bonell Inc. to furnish and deliver curb shoes and plow blades as needed for a contract not to exceed $400,000. I have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. I would like a motion to combine 7A through G, which are all decrease in close. I have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Next, I'd like a motion to approve the change order of 3M Company decrease in close, Max Body Inc. decrease in close, Mandel Metals US Standard Sign decrease in close, Northern Contracting decrease in close, SNS Sign and Safety decrease in close, Standard Industrial decrease in close, and Vulcan Inc. decrease in close.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
I just say, Chris, good job. Every time we get these, it's always the decrease.
Yes.
312,000.
All right.
Good job.
All right.
Keep adding them up. When I see an increase, I like to marry them.
right.
So that the increase is offset by the decrease.
Well, that's good. We have such a great committee. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. That passes. Next is awarding resolution. I have a motion to approve DTR 03-22.
Second.
A recommendation to approve an awarding resolution to RW Devon Company for Milton Township Lambert Road Project. Estimated township cost $462,480.68. A motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor? Yes.
Yeah, I just had a question. So I see that this money comes from fiscal year 2022 bond and then fiscal year 2022 MFT for the total equaling this amount, right?
Correct.
Because I was going to ask, what is the county's obligation? But this is this all the county's obligation?
It's actually no county funds.
No county. funds.
So the statutorily, the county of DuPage, any county is the fiduciary holder of all MFT of the townships. So we advertise, award contracts on behalf of the township, but it's always funded with 100% of their funds. MFT bond refers to the Rebuild Illinois. There was a bond component to local agencies. So it's still, it's MFT, and there's kind of two silos within there, MFT bond, same as regular MFT. And we're just, this is the allotment that went to Milton Township and they're using it.
Thank you so much.
Pick up on that, Chris. Because we administer that and we have to, like you said, do that, we don't get any fee or anything to offset our time.
Correct. We don't.
And
They develop the plans, they do
I
everything.
understand what they do, but we spend time on it and we do that multiple things because we do a lot for the townships with their full time, et cetera.
We do traffic studies, we do letting, stuff like that, but it's kind of an obligation by statute. The county engineer shall.
No, I understand we have to do it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if, MFT funds that have administrative costs to cover our costs.
We haven't in the past.
I know we
There'd have to be a
haven't.
change
Can
to the
we?
statute.
Yeah.
Pardon?
There'd have to be a change to the statute.
Well, does the statute say we can't get paid? We just have to do it without getting.
Well, that's the way the case law has been, that the town, we have a number of responsibilities with the
Okay.
township and we don't get paid for any of them.
Well, it's one thing that we haven't been paid is that we can't get paid. That's the question.
Right.
I don't know the answer. I'm just saying it. Can we, or we just haven't?
What you just said, you'd have to change the statute.
Well, but
It's
does
a
the statute,
question.
no, does the statute says we have to administer it.
Right.
I don't know if the statute says it, we have to
Cannot.
absorb the cost,
Right.
administer for free. That's the question. And I know we haven't. My
Right.
question
And
is.
I haven't looked into it recently, so let me look in to make sure nothing's changed, but previously that was required without fee.
Yeah, I would just like to know that. I mean, that maybe that's the answer. But
Yeah.
Not that we want to do it.
Right.
But I mean, it was like when we were providing sheriff services, additional services, townships were doing it for free, and then we decided to start to at least some of our costs back.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Next is number 9, intergovernmental agreements. Motion between DTR 0383-22,
So moved.
license agreement with the County of DuPage and the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County for temporary access within Timber Ridge Forest Preserve County, cost of $1,500. We have a motion, a second. Are there any questions?
I pick up on what I was talking about, but we have to pay the forest preserve $1,500 just to,
Go on their property and do surveys, yes.
and we do everything for the forest preserves, like for storm. No, we do the stormwater stuff. We help them because they don't even know how to do their own stormwater, like in Waterfall Glen. I was on a conversation with them to try to have Sarah and them help them out. We do that for no cost. We gotta pay $1,500 to walk on their property.
Sarah cuts a better deal.
No, Sarah doesn't. I mean, you're helping them and we don't charge for your, you know, I mean, I would think that they would not charge us a fee for that.
Our stormwater process with Forest Reserve is different than transportation.
Don't understand, but we don't charge. I mean, we were working on that bridge that got blown out at Waterfall Glen, and they don't even know how to do it. You're offering to help do everything for them because they don't even know what they're doing over there. We're doing their job, and we don't charge them, and yet they're going to charge us $1,500 to walk on the property.
Is that 1,500 just an arbitrary amount that somebody picks out? Is it based on, 10 hours of time for somebody that,
Allow us to go on the property.
Right, it's for us to get access to the property, and it might be based on area that we need to go and do the survey work and the like.
Well, I have a motion, we have Sarah send them a bill for her $1,500.
Well, first of all, it'll be more than 1,500.
I know.
Say if it ain't 5, you ain't saying. All right, that's it. May I have any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Next is a grant proposal notification. I moved to place on file GPN 05-22 Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, $1,500,000 project multi-use path between St. Charles Road and Butterfield Road. A motion and second place on file. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. And next is item 11, authorization to travel. Move to approve
So moved.
authorization for overnight travel for the senior project engineer to travel to Champaign, Illinois from October 19th to October 20th to attend the all traffic engineering safety conference, expenses, lodging, meals for an estimated cost of $580. We have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Next is 11B, which is authorization for overnight travel for the director of transportation, the county engineer to travel to Washington DC from September 27th through September 28th to attend the Surface Transportation Board public hearing. Expenses to include transportation, lodging, meals for an estimated cost of $1,109.25. And I'm glad that you were going to this because this is a really important issue with us.
This is about the railroad merger.
Yes, it is. So again, you're going there to give testimony and support on it. So I think that we are a player and we have a voice and we are a participant, and I'm glad to bring in you to do that. Mary?
And Sam and I were both at the meeting 2 weeks ago, and Chris did a great presentation, but there were just loads of mayors, first responders. It was a really good hearing, and there were probably somewhere between 200 and 300 people there. So, and the best news was Marty Oberman, who is the head of the Surface Transportation Board and was appointed by President Biden and my former alderman in the city, as Marty said when I went to him back in the last century. He was there, and he was there for the entire over 3-hour meeting. So that was very good. And he knows the region. So that's a really important thing.
And I think the best we're looking at is to get as many concessions and limitations and make it as restrictive as we possibly can. I don't think we can block it, but we can at least have enough in there where we are at least coming out with not getting beaten up like you have in your area with your.
Yeah, and other thing too, that they can do a lot about, underpasses, et cetera. There's so much they could do. And at this point, it sounds like there's $10 million on the table to help the communities apply for grants. So $10 million doesn't touch anything. So that's something they really could work on.
There's a lot of issues that we need to address, and it's always the collateral things that we're gonna get, beat up later on with. So hopefully we have at least some reasonable people that make reasonable decisions.
And the worst thing, they keep talking about 8 to 15 trains a day. And when the Chicago Northwestern and Union Pacific started 25 years ago, that's how it starts.
Yeah, next year it's 30.
Well, that's why we need to keep them accountable. If they're saying 8 to 10 trains a day, it's gotta be 8 to 10
Yeah, and
trains a
that
day
should be
or
X amount
fine.
of times and length and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think
There is a lot that can be done.
restrictions we can put on,
Yeah.
at least it makes it more palatable, especially when it's a public safety issue with the ambulances and police and fire. So,
That's right.
I just.
Other parts of the country aren't as much at grade as we are, and that's where it's really bad. So, yeah, so thank you. Do the same great job when you go to DC.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All in favor, say
Aye.
aye. The ayes have it. Next is presentations.
You always know Sid's gonna present when he wears a tie. Okay? But, kind of tipped me off.
Giveaway, huh?
So giving us an presentation on the DuPage Trails Plan update. Sid, please, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Good morning. Here to talk about the Trails Plan and give an update on our recent survey for our public engagement. Right now, we are at the innovation and compatible uses evaluation phase. So we're moving along. We're going to take a little bit longer before we get to the fiscal impacts, and we'll have a draft and final plan coming last quarter of this year, first quarter next year. Next slide, please. So as you guys may recall, our first survey took place in the fall. We asked people about their usage habits, preferences. We wanted to follow up with the public with some questions about innovative uses, flexibilities that we could provide on the trail right of way. And we'll talk about that in a minute. As you guys also may recall, we have a project website set up. So we placed our survey on that website, brought a link through DuPage County's website for folks to get there. We also placed these yard signs so folks could scan them and go right to the survey, fill it out. Next slide, please. We had 2,300 survey responses in our first survey. And just, some quick highlights. We found out that most people who access the trail live very close to it. Folks use it as a place for fitness and recreation. More than 3/4 of respondents use the trail at least once a week. Trail users indicated that they relied on a combination of signs and maps as well as their smartphones to navigate. There were some concerns about conflicts with automobiles, but the majority favored native plants and grasses along our trails in general. Next slide, please. So this time around, we got about 820 respondents. So in total, we've had 3,100 responses, which is 2,800 unique survey respondents. So through both of these, bless you, through both of these, we've gotten quite a bit of public involvement. This was active between April and June. We had some interesting findings that we'll talk about here. 58% of respondents indicated that they're unlikely to use a bike share program if it were placed on the trails. 63% of respondents also indicated that they have not used a bike rack on or near the trails. I think most folks felt like that there's enough bike storage already, or they'd like some closer to their destination. 22% of these respondents indicated that they traveled 6+ miles to access our trails network, which is kind of in line with the first survey, where about 26% indicated they traveled that far. So 1 in 5 or so, 1 in 4 are coming from a long distance to access our trails. And then about half of the respondents said that dining was part of their visit to the trails network. So that gave us a little bit of a window into what people want to do when they're out there. Next slide, please. We also asked folks about trail etiquette. How do they feel about other trail users using the space with them? What were some reminders that maybe need to be placed out there to help re-educate some of the other trail users? There was concern about conflicts with bicyclists, concerns about acknowledging the stop signs that are at the trail roadway crossings, and then trail cleanliness rules, whether that be fly dumping, littering, etc. So those are some things we're going to focus on as we move forward. Next slide, please. The most common trail hazards that the respondents indicated they experienced, luckily for us, are things that we routinely respond to very quickly: flooding, dead trees blocking the path after storms, and difficulty seeing oncoming traffic at intersections, which in a lot of cases we might own through the intersection, but need to coordinate with the municipality that owns the right of way at that intersection. We tend to address these things rather quickly. So good to see. So this slide, I'll try to help explain this. This is depicting the kinds of signage that people felt like they needed, the amount of information they felt like they needed when they're on the trail. So this lower intensity represents, those quicker, smaller signs that tell you about maybe major landmarks or major trail crossings ahead, whereas that higher intensity represents the big sign assemblies that have lots of maps and information attributed to them. The percentages here are people who have indicated that these are their type of signage preference. So the takeaway from this is that people have prioritized that natural aesthetic of the trail. They don't want a bunch of gigantic signs all over the place. There's no directive for us to increase that amount of information, but maybe to prioritize that at major trailheads. But I think people did like more of this mile marker looking aesthetic, and so they want to be able to escape, feel like they're in nature, and not be bombarded with too much information. Next slide, please. We also asked people where they felt like they needed wayfinding signage. At what locations on the trail do you feel like you need a little bit of information? At other trails, not surprisingly, that was the number one. Number two was at major crossings. And number three was to or through downtowns or near metro stations. And we grouped those together because so much of the path network is, it goes near enough to downtowns that the downtowns and the metro stations are kind of together. So we felt like people are basically asking us, how do I get to the next trail? How do I get to the next crossing? Where do I go from that crossing? And what major landmarks are nearby? Next slide, please. So to us, this indicated that we have a little bit of work to do for our hierarchy of sign information, so that, again, we prioritize where those higher intensity signs are located along the network, perhaps at just major trailheads. And also we need to provide some standards that other agencies that we permit to place signs on our network will need to borrow from. So our recommendations moving forward, we're going to look at standardizing our colors, our fonts of our signs, because there are some inconsistencies there that we need to work on. And then also produce a sample sign family that serves as guidelines for us and for other agencies. That could be for mile markers, for directional signs, trail etiquette signs, interpretive signs, etc. Next slide, please. So next we'll talk about innovative uses. And so these are the flexibilities that we want to allow on our trail right-of-way network. We're generally looking at these in 4 buckets, and we'll get to how the public reacted to this in a second. Trailhead improvements would be any major locations, bless you, where people are entering or exiting the path system, and maybe want more information about the path network itself. Environmental sustainability and stewardship, meaning how we are a caretaker of the environment on the trails. Habitat enhancements, we're looking at habitat of both vegetation and of animals, and so we'll be working on that. And then cultural, educational, and artistic, that's that human element, how it's reflected on the trails. Next slide, please. We have more questions than this that we asked the public in general, but just for a brief preview here, we asked people to indicate to us what they felt were the best uses of the trail right of way and what were the least interested uses of the trail right of way for them. So we ranked this by interest here. Stuff that floated to the top that most people were positive about were habitat restoration projects, gathering locations, covered shelters, and then dog cleanup stations. So any place where you could grab a quick bag to clean up after your pet. In this middle bucket here, people were generally positively interested in this stuff. So green infrastructure, bike repair stations, and locations where there might be exhibits of public art. The stuff on the right here were things that were generally somewhat controversial. There were a lot of people that indicated sort of a negative attitude towards these things. So seasonal decor was something that most people absolutely did not want to see on the path network. I think folks didn't feel like they wanted to reserve any space specifically just for dogs or outdoor pet activities. And bike storage, again, this comes up. I think people felt like we had enough bike storage that's out there, and that they either wanted to get to their destination where there could be bike storage there, or to continue on beyond the network without parking their bike on the trail. Next slide. So moving forward, there's just a few things I want to highlight here of what we're going to work on. We're going to release the full Survey 2 engagement summary. So similar to our last survey, we have a full summary of what respondents indicated their preferences towards. Further evaluation of proposed trail right-of-way flexibilities. So that's those innovative uses we just talked about. An evaluation of locations where we can add green infrastructure and stormwater enhancements. We're going to look at that on a location by location basis. And then a development of signage consistency and sign family standards. So we just talked about that sign family, how we produce that for people who want to place signs on our network, and how we'll maintain our own signage as well. So with that, I'll take any questions. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you personally. I live right next door to the Prairie Path, and a couple weeks ago, there was graffiti on the Prairie Path itself. And I talked to Sid, and it was done by the end of the day. They came out with blacktop, and it was just something you don't want to encourage in a general usage. And my other question for you about all this, is there ever been any consideration trailhead improvement, adding restrooms, adding some kind of a, I guess we're not going to look at building structures, but porta potties? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that was a question that was on our survey. And so you'll see that on the full engagement summary. People did react positively to that. So that's something that we'll be looking into going forward.
Perhaps maybe at a more, more used area, like when you enter when the trail splits in Wheaton, where you've got a lot of traffic, it's a high visibility area, because maintenance and destruction, we don't want either of those, so.
Understood.
Thank you,
Sure.
but thanks again, I was delighted.
Of course. Any other questions?
Why dog cleanup was so important, yet dog parks was not interested? It seems to me it would go hand in hand. And are we getting more increase of dog groups and pets on these trails, or is it still limited to, mostly walkers and bike riders? And third group would be people with pets. I took from them for the categories. What's your thought?
I think people walk their dogs more frequently in specific areas. Excuse me. I think you go through a place like Elmhurst or Villa Park where there's not as much tree cover and there's more space, you might see more dog walkers there. But generally where it's a more forested area, you don't quite see as many. So the short answer to your question is, I'm not sure why people wanted more cleanup but less reserved space specifically for the pets. Maybe they're okay with the amount of space that they have to just walk their dog.
And
I just want to add, I wanted to ask how well the dog cleanup stations are maintained. I live in a townhouse community. And there's probably a half a dozen of these dog cleanup stations around the community. Never in all the 6 years I've lived there has there ever been actual plastic bags in any of the stations.
Oh, no.
So I'm just wondering, do we maintain these and make sure that they're filled?
If we would put them out there, yeah, we would either maintain them ourselves or find a partner to do that for us.
Good, thank you.
Liz?
Dan, I'm thinking maybe it's people that don't have dogs that might see stuff on the trail
Well,
that
no, I'm
want
just- I'm
that
saying
picked
it
up
is-
too, that might want to have, that might be a priority for them to make sure that there's stuff available for people to pick up after their dogs or whatever.
Was that the concern, Sid, or is that something else? Is that they want the plastic bag provided? Is that it? Or?
I don't think that there was a whole lot of
When I
specificity.
had a dog, I always have a couple plastic bags in my pocket. Just like
Exactly.
everybody else did,
You're an irresponsible dog owner if you don't have that.
And some people don't. I have gotten complaints about people not picking up after their dogs. So
A lot of people don't.
But sure.
I think with the,
I know. And I,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, anyway, I think the issue with the dog parks is that most people are served elsewhere, and I don't think we really, thinking about the trails, I don't think we really have the space that would make an appropriate dog park usage. There is the one with the water that I've not been to yet. We just got dog info up by north of North Avenue, 53. So that's on our bucket list, but that's a different area with it's a forest preserve, so it's got the actual acreage to do it. So, but I think having the stations would be a bad idea. I don't think we have to do them, a huge number of them.
As long as
people
they're
tend to enter.
Well, they're gonna be
What was that?
maintained.
As long as they're filled.
Well, I think you have an HOA meeting in your future.
Sheila, you want?
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you,
please.
Don. I appreciate that. I'm not on this committee, but regarding the dog poop bags, there are a couple of locations in the forest preserve that provide those, but they're like the bougiest bags I've ever seen in my life. They're like triple lined, and I think it's crazy because I think people come and just take a handful out of these boxes. So
yeah.
I would probably advocate for a single ply not compostable, but a one that'll disintegrate in the landfills.
That's
But
nice.
those other bags, I'm just like, oh my God, who did they know?
Doesn't have a dog, obviously, when you pick up a single ply bag, so.
I have a couple dogs.
It is doable.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, my only concern was the shelters. I mean, are we talking at trailheads? Obviously, we like clean, sight vision down the path. We don't want anybody lurking and hiding behind any of these things. Are we talking shelters at the trailheads, a little bit, off the trailheads, or are we talking about shelters like in the middle of the trail? I mean, that would scare me at that point. That would just be places for, I think, no good kids and everything else, and just a bad element. So you're talking, is that what they're talking, maybe shelters around the trailheads,
I
when
think
they're
that's-
coming in and out?
Yeah, I think that's the idea.
Okay.
Because, as you had pointed out, that could be a safety concern if it's just kind of in a random location. Also, people wanted that natural aesthetic, so we want to try to preserve that for as much as possible. That's a good point. Thank you.
Thank
I love your idea of the porta potties along the trail.
Maintenance.
All right, anybody have anything else? If not, Sid, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next presentation, it's like JPS.
I was gonna tell you, like, finance,
Permanent
3 hours.
ordinance framework with Bill and Dave presenting. Thank you.
If I could just serve as a segue to this, as you recall, our last committee meeting, we talked about our 2022 strategic initiatives and gave an update. And one of our initiatives is to look at our highway permitting ordinance and update, and update in 15 or plus years. So that was a strategic imperative. I said we'd be coming to you soon. Soon is a week later or 2 weeks later. So Bill and Dave will talk about the framework of our permitting ordinance.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone, as well. Like Chris said, I'm just going to kind of give you a framework and introduction of our planned update to the permit ordinance. And change the slide. So briefly, just gave you an overview of our permitting function, and then to talk about our recommended ordinance updates, the fee structure change that we're looking at to simplify things, and then the next steps. So DOT is responsible for reviewing, approving, and permitting all work that's performed within the county highway rights of way. And that includes portions of the Illinois Prairie Path and the Great Western Trail. So a lot of what Sid was just talking about, if someone else was doing it, would require a permit. As Chris mentioned, the current permitting ordinance was enacted in 2006 and was last updated in 2010. So it has been quite some time. We approve approximately 600 permits per year. Those include requests for residential and commercial driveways, utilities, sidewalks, light poles, signs, and other various equipment that public and private entities want to install in our right-of-way. We also permit special events such as the Naperville Marathon, festivals, and events on the Illinois Prairie Path. I do want to mention specifically that this ordinance excludes the small cell wireless facilities and the permitting process for that. That's covered by a separate ordinance that was approved by the committee a few years ago, and that's got a lot of specific requirements under state and federal law. And so it's completely its own ordinance, its own process. Next slide, please. Like Chris mentioned, this is one of our strategic initiatives, and so this update's been under consideration for some time at this point. I want to start out by saying we're not really proposing major changes to the ordinance, the structure of it. Most of what we're looking at is revisions that are going to let us establish some new and modern permitting techniques. Part of that ties into the permitting software that we, all the departments implemented this past winter. And one of the things that came out of that is we have a lot of definitions that are in our ordinance that are not modern. They don't match up with the software. They don't match up with our peer agencies. As part of it, we looked at what are our peer agencies doing? And in addition to the definitions, one of the things that came out was the idea of introducing a technical manual that supplements the ordinance. And so we're looking at that as an option here for us to include. The technical manual would specify things like the design requirements, the standards, and the submittal process, the things that change periodically that don't necessarily need to be things that the committee's involved with. So the idea would be that the permit ordinance would be the policy that established by the committee, by the board, that then the technical manual would be the way that we implement that policy. So we can adjust as we go, the specific details that need to be handled. And the technical manual could then be updated at the departmental level. We've also streamlined the fee structure. And this has been an area that's caused a lot of confusion and concern for our applicants, and also a lot of extra work for our staff. So I'm going to ask Dave Fury, who's our highway permit supervisor, to speak specifically about the fee structure really quickly for you.
The simplified fee structure, that's what we want to hear about. That's what it said already, simplified.
That's it right there.
Let's take a typical permit through the old way. Take about 30 minutes.
Can you flip to the next slide? So under the current fee structure, we charge an application fee up front, and then we charge additional permit fees that are calculated once that permit's reviewed. So, and that adds complexity while we're collecting twice. There is multiple categories that are distributed throughout the fee table currently, and they're based on quantities of what's installed. We also have a lot of small dollar amounts that are $10 to $20 fees that are charged. So we find that we spend a lot of effort collecting the remaining $10 balance, $20 balance. But the effort involved in collecting it doesn't amount to the fee that's remaining. You can flip to the next slide. This is the current fee table, and you can see this first column too. Everything has an F fee attached to it, and then the other ones are attached. All these categories are represented, and there's one more page. Flip. Next slide. This is the remaining portion of it. Each of those categories are totaled up in the current fee summary. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed table that we are going to, and so we've eliminated that whole column of the application fees, so we won't have to collect twice. This also will take out the charges for single-family residential driveways. So the homeowner will be happy to not pay for it too. They'll still have to go through the application process, but the fee won't be there. That's a low volume of the requests we get. We're estimating about 20 to 25 of those a year. So the exposure to what those charges could amount to is minimal. Also for utilities too, we can add, there will be an exemption for work that says forced relocation too, where they have to relocate for one of our projects too. So that flexibility will still be in there. We charge for pavement open cuts for utilities too. That's where we see a level of effort for ourselves too, that where we spend more staff time involved in the permits, we're trying to balance that towards those customers paying more than the ones that are more over-the-counter type of permit application. Some of these haven't changed. Detours are about the same as before. We did add charges for revisions and for extensions of permits that weren't charged before. So those will be new charges. Some of the categories have gone up, but those are the access charges are where we spend the majority of our time on the fewer number of permits. So that seemed appropriate. Next slide. As I mentioned, we do, I didn't mention yet, we will waive permit fees for municipal applicants. We find that they currently do waive fees for us. A lot of those improvements they do result in improvements to our system too, like sidewalks added or facilities that cut down on what county has to do. And also that some of those projects are also pursued through IGAs, and they have their own subterms attached to that. Pass it back. We'll go ahead and wrap up. There was one piece of language that we've got in the draft ordinance right now that I wanted to mention because it is a little bit of a change. There's been some discussion in the past about some kind of an annual permit or allowing kind of batched applications, things like that. So what we're proposing to do is put this wording in that would give us the ability to work with primarily a utility company when they come to us with a large scale project. So like a ComEd might come in with trying to do smart meters throughout an entire community, or AT&T is trying to expand their connections to not individual homes, but upgrade things along their system. And that in the past, that would be individual permits for every one of those locations. To say that there's an opportunity for the county engineer to negotiate a special fee that would be more applicable to that type of work, that something that's not specifically covered in the ordinance, but is a large scale and complex. So we've got that as a proposed language in there. And then next slide, please, and we'll wrap up here. So the next steps for us with the ordinance, we plan to come with a proposed ordinance for your consideration at the November committee meeting and then November board meeting, beginning of the month. I mentioned the permit software earlier. Whatever comes out of the ordinance revision will require some updates to the permit software, and that probably will have a cost associated with it. We'll bring that separately to the committee for approval of any cost to that contract. And then as of today, we're targeting an implementation date sometime in the first quarter of 2023. When we bring the ordinance to you in November, we'll have a specific date identified, but right now that's kind of time frame. That's it, yeah.
When was this last looked at? When was this last done? When was this?
So last update was 2010.
2010. I can't believe this update. I would be so ticked off as a homeowner to have to pay $100 for the opportunity to apply for a permit where I had to pay more money.
Yeah.
That just, I mean, just any marketing person would see the way this is written and go, no, why not just make the permit fee $350 in this case?
And that's exactly one of the reasons.
So, oh my gosh, it took us 12 years to realize this is really bad PR.
I will
Thank
say
you for the work on this.
To our credit, we tried to go through in 2016, but or we tried to look at it, but the goal of having permit software is irrelevant. So now the software is up, we're taking it.
Yeah, thank you.
Mary?
And speaking about permit software, you don't anticipate, well, there may be obviously a cost to do this. You don't anticipate any problems with compatibility with the new system?
No, when we were setting up
the new systems.
the new system has been bought by everybody collectively, right? So when Dave and I were going through the process with Sarah's team and the voting folks, we knew that we were coming in with an ordinance update. So we tried to put in, we weren't sure what it was going to include, but we tried to put in some areas that the developer would be able to accommodate some of these things. So we don't know what the cost is going to be, but we had an eye toward it when they were building out our portion of the software.
Did you just say eye toured? Did you say we eye toured it?
I don't know exactly what word I said.
Oh, okay.
With an eye toward.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey.
I thought an eye tour was a new concept, but I'm not.
Yeah, no, we had an eye toward. We were looking at.
An eye toward.
We're trying to be proactive.
Okay. No,
I
that
tour
sounds.
doggy bags. Where is this committee going?
These are important practical matters.
And
but
hopefully
it
when we
sounds- it sounds very
come back in
helpful.
November, you're seeing all these same faces too, by the way. All right.
Can I just then summarize so that this was a framework today?
Sarah, no, I was actually.
So what I wanted to do was just to get a consensus from the committee that obviously the new fee structure, very simple to calculate, eliminate the application fee, 1 page, you can go in, access, $50.
100% yes.
Yeah.
So then the other item, waive residential fees for the driver repairs, installations, they're very minor. And then the second item is to waive municipal fees, because again, these are oftentimes waived as allowed by ordinance by the county engineer, because it's a betterment overall to our right of way. If they're going to rebuild a sidewalk with new ADA ramps, why am I gonna charge them a fee for that when that's something I don't have to do? So that's the consensus. That's how we'll structure our update.
Are we adding batching into that as well?
The utility batching opportunity, that could be something negotiated between
I
the
think that
county.
makes sense. It makes everything you assess. Anybody else have anything else that we should add, changes? Anything? Okay, well, thank you guys for that presentation. Any report from our state's attorney?
Nothing this time, Mr. Chairman.
Anything under old business? there,
No.
boss? Oh, wait. Paul.
Quick question for you. I'm assuming we do have railroad crossings that are in the unincorporated area. And if we do, it was brought up at my intergovernmental meeting, having the 988 signs there for suicide prevention. And I'm just wondering if we have that on deck or whether we've done that already. I just think that's something that's important to have it out there.
So that's something that came out of intergovernmental, and Bill and I are research staff and looking into that. We do know in the municipal areas in the downtown, we do see those signs. So the question is, how do we incorporate those signs into the county rights of way at unincorporated areas, or even incorporated areas that just, it's not a municipal street, it's a county highway at a railroad crossing. So we'll look at that and report back to the committee.
Okay, and then real quick, another one, I got an email yesterday from US DOT regarding 160 million available for smart transportation technology. I'm hoping you guys got that too. It looks like there's a deadline for November 18th to get it in. It's for municipalities and counties. So I think it's something that's going to help us move forward in terms of technology on our highways.
We get free money, so we should be actively pursuing.
I do know that through our central signal system, we have been investing tens of millions of dollars in coordinating our signals, talking to our signals, remotely monitoring our signals, and have cameras on our system deployed system-wide. We have 2 major expansions going on this year into next year. And so they'll take our 340 signals, about 300 of them maybe, 275, and bring them all together so we can sit and monitor and do the like. We're also working with Lake County on a similar arrangement that they'll monitor our signals. We get to see theirs, but we'll look into that grant to see if there's something more.
All right.
Beyond what we're already doing.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, that was old business. Hey, one quick question. We had that strike in those travel pits, delayed concrete, et cetera. Have we been able to keep up with our projects because of that, or we have projects that are gonna be delayed now the next spring because of that?
So we have, we're pretty confident 87th of Woodward will be completely deferred till next year. Utility relocations are ongoing due to the strike, as well as utility relocations. It was just anything with aggregate, asphalt, concrete, stone. We have one project that our annual resurfacing program down south, I think it's 55th Street. We're taking it day by day to see how much we'll let the contractor do, because once they start, they gotta finish.
Correct.
And so, but for our program this year, definitely one project and maybe an element of another project, but nothing
It's in
significant.
my district, and I see that.
Yeah, so
I'm watching that, I was just curious.
Takes care of old business. Anybody have any new business? That means business that not been brought up before.
Thank you.
Well, sales tax numbers are up, maybe we should ask for a little more.
Good. I'm telling you, second best ever.
is it 2 million compounded?
All right, that being, well, without objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.